Welcome back. You're watching The Globe. The New South Institute has compiled a report titled Personalising and De-Personalising Power. Now, the report explores what needs to be done to reform and professionalise the public service. The full report will be launched on Tuesday, the 28th of February. Now, the report delves into the role of the civil service and whether it's responsive to the current South African demographic outlook. Researchers looked at whether there's separation between the political sphere and the administrative sphere. Now, the report states that separation of the two were not clearly outlined and potentially rendering the vast majority of public offices open to be filled in exclusively political criteria. Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined by one of the authors of the report and research fellow at the New South Institute, Rafael Leite. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Peter.
So, Rafael, what informed this report? What was it that you were trying to find out? What inspired it?
Well, the report shows that South Africa still has a challenge in separating political office and administrative office. We agree that there is progress in limiting political discretion in appointment of public officials, and this is still an incipient and incomplete endeavor. The report notes that jurisprudence in South Africa has advanced in a way that it limits the discretion of politicians to appoint professionals to public service, but the model has there's too much to be done. So the idea was to look at what we are doing great in South Africa and what needs to be done yet.
How much of what's playing out now is of a historical nature? Because South Africa had a lot of work to do after 1994 when a full democratic dispensation came into play. Talk to us a little bit about that transition and what it's meant in terms of reforming the way things happen.
Well, the transition gives the incumbent government such a huge power to transform the public administration. And this means that the government of South Africa has implemented a very, very important affirmative action in the selection of people to work in the government. And this has been a very important endeavor in a country such as South Africa after the apartheid. But what we see is that there is a lack of consistent assessment of managerial competences as a precondition for the appointment of executive officials to the public service. So the thing is that the affirmative action that was implemented, it was important, and this is a very complex issue, but it's important to ensure that the policies that aim to readdress the past injustices are implemented in a way that it's fair and effective without compromising the professionalization of the public service.
We're often praised for having one of the best constitutions in the world, and I think partly because we were able to do it late in history, we were able to pick the best from around the world. It sounds as if that the provisions are there in the Constitution. What then is going wrong?
Well, I don't think that this is something related to the Constitution, to be honest. I am Brazilian myself. I live in São Paulo, in the NSI offices in São Paulo. And we also have a very interesting Constitution after a period of military dictatorship. And the Constitution offered to the citizens a lot of rights, and the rights to democracy, the right to a good and clean environment. And the thing is that all the emergent democracies around the world have a challenge in separating administrative and political office. And this is something that it's related to the day-to-day of the public administration. It's also, of course, related to the political culture of each country, but I don't think that the Constitution is the cause or a problem for South Africa to implement a merit system, a system to protect merit in the public service. The problem is that there is a huge challenge of public implementation, of policy implementation in South Africa. So the challenge is, well, you have a good Constitution, you have people that have the competences to exercise the public office, but how do we implement a system to assess those managerial competences before people are appointed to office? So the problem is not the political power to appoint people, but the way that the political power to select people for the government is not aligned with the system to select people based on merit skills.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about cadre deployment, and it's highly politically charged. What should be happening in terms of proper vetting to make sure that a fit and proper person is appointed to public office?
Well, the report suggests that there is the need, as I say, to be consistent in assessing managerial competences as a precondition of appointment of people, of executive officers in the public service. So the cadre deployment is the way that you call the political affiliation, the way that you select people based on political affiliations in South Africa. This is something that happens in every democracy. The problem here is that the appointment of officials only based in political affiliations in South Africa is a problem. So we need a way to find an equilibrium between the political questions and the assessment of competence and managerial competences. So I wouldn't say that the cause of the problems are cadre deployment, because this is something normal in democracies, but the way that we can't equilibrate the political challenges of having a democracy and selecting people from the ruling party, but also having a system that allows the politicians and the government to also assess merit and skills of the people that are appointed to the office.
How does a country like ours manage something like black economic empowerment, affirmative action? Because we have these historical challenges, and yet we have to progress our people, and it looks as if sometimes that desire to promote and develop might lead us into a situation where we don't always have the very best candidates in the position, but perhaps ones that are there because we want to encourage a certain group of people to go through. How does a country like South Africa navigate these two issues?
Well, this is a very great question. It's not a challenge that only affect South Africa. Multiracial democracies as Brazil, as India, Indonesia have also this kind of challenge of how do you equilibrate the searching for justice and to ensure that minorities are also represented inside the government, and at the same time having merit systems to protect the public office from excessive politicization. So in the case of South Africa, what we see, there is a collapse of certain public offices in the country, and this might indicate that some policies like Black economic empowerment and affirmative action are related to these challenges of professionalizing the public service. But I would say that this is a very complex issue that requires careful analysis. It's important to ensure that policies that aim to readdress past injustice are effective in a way that you don't compromise professionalization. So I don't think that those are objectives that cannot be followed together. You have affirmative action in advanced democracies such as US, Canada, United Kingdom, and in those countries, the idea of having representation of minority groups inside the public administration is also linked to the idea that you have to professionalize the public service. So I don't think that those are separated questions, because you only have a good effective public administration when people that are served by this administration are also representative of the people that are served by this administration. But I think that this is it's a very complex issue, and it demands very careful analysis.
Your report talks about the importance of autonomous administration, and I just want you to talk to us a little bit about what that means and why it's so important.
Well, having an autonomous administration is something that it's important to every democracy, because democracy is not only about vote for people and selecting people to be representatives. Democracy is also about having a competent government that can deliver what people voted for in the elections. So to have a government that is effective in deliver what people want from the government, such as rights and public services, you need effective administration. And the only way to build effective administration is having a clear separation of the administrative and the political office, which means that you have separated career paths for civil servants and for politicians, and the politicians could not decide what are the path inside the government for public servants. So you have separated areas and separated incentives for each one, the politicians and the public servants. This it's important to make public servants to look at public service delivery as a way to advance in their careers and not their relations to politicians. So separating the administrative and political office creates an incentive for the public servants to deliver more. And this is important for people to trust in the government, because if people vote for changing in government, if people vote for the government and don't see changing in the way that the government is run, they become they can't trust in the government. So this is a problem in a lot of democracies around the world, and this is why it's important to separate the political and administrative office.
Rafael Leite, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Your insights are greatly appreciated. Muito obrigado. Adeus.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Okay, thanks so much. That's Rafael Leite with talking to us about this interesting report called Personalising and De-Personalising Power, the appointment of executive officers in key state institutions. Yeah, very interesting reading. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, a doozy legend has just won his 10th consecutive doozy canoe marathon in 2023, and I think it's now 13 doozy titles. Legend indeed. Find out who that is after this.